Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the show that looks at all aspects of the paranormal and anomalous world. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me as he does every week is the one and only Steve Mera. Now, Steve, this week we're going to be venturing down to
Yeah.
Antarctica. It's going to be a fantastic, enthralling show. I'm sure you're looking forward to it. And
Well, yeah. Of course I am. I mean, it's a pinnacle area of fascination. The frozen continent as to the mysteries that might lie there. And the thing is that, like I've said, previous times, over the years when, it's sort of done TV shows, always somebody has to pop in a question about Antarctica and, oh, what do you think's going on there? And I just have to mostly shrug my shoulders and go, well, I can only quote what other people have said, but I don't know how, I mean, have these other people been? Have they even been checked? Have they researched it? Have they looked into the location? Or is it just sort of they picked little rumours out of books and stories and folk tales and things like that from the past? Most of the time, it's the latter, to be honest with you. So, really, you can't put your hand on heart and say, well, you know what, if I need to go to somebody and find out some credible truths about the place, that has to be Brad Olsen. There's nobody else on the planet really I could trust, to be honest with you, give me a credible answers. So, for me, I love the subject, especially around an area which is very little known. And I think it's going to be fascinating for our viewers tonight.
Oh, absolutely. So, as Steve mentioned there, our guest this evening is a researcher, lecturer, and author, Brad Olsen. So, first of all, Brad, thanks for joining us. And how are you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I'm doing great. And boy, I've been waiting to talk to Steve about Antarctica for many years now. So, really happy to be here and share some information about the ice continent today.
Oh well, we look forward to hearing that. So let's get stuck straight in then. Basically, your new book, Secrets of Antarctica. I suppose a good way to start this is what made you want to write about research and write and investigate about Antarctica. And can you tell us a little bit about that research journey? Because I understand it's quite fascinating then.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm a world traveler. I've been to now all seven continents, and Antarctica was the seventh. So a decade ago, I've been looking into ways to go down there. Most people take a cruise ship. You can fly there and go to the bases and even jump on a cruise ship from St. George Island. But I went down to Ushuaia, Argentina, about 7 years ago. And that's where about 90% of all the boat traffic leaves. And I was really going to think I would take a cruise ship down there, but the opportunity came up to get on a sailboat. Wow, yeah. My dad had a sailboat, and I have some experience on that. And so I thought, this is the way to go. And then we were on that boat for 26 days, so almost a month. And you get a lot longer of a trip on a sailboat compared to a cruise ship, which is really only down there for about a week. And we were down there for over 2 weeks. The extra days were sailing back and forth the stormiest seas of the world, the Drake Passage. And boy, I got so seasick on the way out. I think I lost about 25 pounds on that trip.
Yeah.
Bar none, the hardest trip I've ever taken in my life, but it was worth it because it is just a different kind of experience. You don't even feel like you're on Earth down there. It's so strange and different from everything we're accustomed to up here because it's 99% covered in ice. So it's just it's like going to Europa, the
Yeah.
moon of
Yeah.
Mars, which is
Yeah.
covered with ice. It's really off-worldly feeling. But I've been researching this for a decade, was poring over maps and finding that the Germans never left New Schwabenland, that they set up their bases as West Germany during the Cold War, and they're still there now at several bases in that area. So the mystery just really expanded with the more layers of the onions I peeled off, the deeper the mystery began. And I
Well,
think, Steve, in
yeah.
UFO studies, sometimes the deeper you go, the
Yeah.
deeper the
Exactly.
mystery is.
It really is. I mean, can I ask you, there's lots of hypotheses about, the Germans and the Nazi bases there, and of course, German flying saucer tech and
Mm.
caves and, waterways and all sorts of stories. Films have been built based around them. Whole books have been based around them. And of course, they always throw in about the American forces. Yeah. And, the Dairy events, which may or may not exist. I'm not too sure. It's one of those question marks. But isn't it just one of those things that you get constantly asked about where you don't really know for sure? But I mean, we know that obviously there was an operation took place, American, operation, and it was obviously a very large operation. But as to what it exactly was about, we don't know. Did you look into that area as well? And what did you discover there, Brad?
Well, on the cover of Secrets of Antarctica is a rendition of the Battle of
Yes.
High Jump. And Admiral Byrd, he went down to Antarctica 5 different times. High jump was the fourth time. And before he left, he just left, he did a press conference and only said that this particular trip was military in nature. Really? What what is to do down there militarily
Nothing
speaking?
much, is there really?
And they went with an armada of ships, not only US ships, the very first Antarctica winter after World War II. They couldn't get down there soon enough. But there were also allied nations also involved. Canada had some troops as well as Australia. So it was really a multinational allied invasion of Antarctica. And they had intel from the Brits through Operation Tamerlane, who were spying on the Germans throughout World War II. In fact, I went to several of the spy stations that the Brits were using on the Palmer
Mm.
Peninsula. And they knew that the Germans were sending tons of materiel, personnel, and a whole bunch of stuff to this New Schwabenland region, tipped off the Americans. And then High Jump was supposed to be a 6 month expedition, called off after 2 months. So when Admiral Byrd was coming back to the U.S., they were stopped in Chile to refurbish the ship, get some more supplies, and he gave an interview. And his famous quote was, he wasn't to disturb people with this fact, but there would be the ability of an enemy to fly pole to pole at incredible speeds.
Yeah,
So they had encountered something
you
down
must
there
have.
of a very high tech nature.
What do you
Yeah.
think that is, Brad? I mean, because there's two trains of thought there. And obviously, are we speaking something extraterrestrial? Are we speaking advanced Third Reich technology? And it's interesting the Operation Paperclip, scenario, because then you've got these German engineers who are going to have know-how. And so, how does all that fit in? What are your thoughts? What's your research tell you on that?
Exactly. When I first started looking into high jump and the craft coming up out of the water and even out of ice caves and descending on the central group of high jump, because it was split off into three carrier groups that I originally thought, well, they had made some pacts with reptilians, and maybe they were those ships. Maybe they were alien craft. But then the more I looked into it and saw that they had been developing and backward engineering
Mm.
their own craft for over a decade,
Yeah,
it's very well possible that those were German ships that came up out of the ice. And there were some sightings during World War II of dish-shaped craft,
yeah,
most notably at the biggest tank battle in the world at Kursk outside of Moscow. And that's really when the tides turned in World War II in 1943. So the high staff knew World War II was going to end not very well for the Germans. So they had 2 years to get all their material and top personnel out of Germany and into not only the Antarctica base 211 and the New Berlin base, which are two separate bases, but also to these micronations in South America.
yeah,
That when I was on my trip down there 7 years ago, of course, I was in and out of South America, but I was looking into all these micronations, which is a term that John Lear, he and I were corresponding. He's since passed away, but he was saying that even Area 51 is a micronation in many ways. You take a vow when you go to work
Yeah.
there, and you're basically a citizen of that place, and you can be confined and basically dropped off if you're not compliant. And there were these micronations, and some of them I got kind of close to in Chile, in Argentina, and Brazil, three countries that had these German-owned micronations. And I think some of the material went there as well.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
whole other story. But
Well,
that's,
it certainly makes common sense, doesn't it, Brad? Really, I mean, to
yeah.
scatter these information widely, just to keep hold of them. To be honest with you, you've got all your tools in one bag, and that suddenly gets seized upon. That's not a good thing. So it does make common sense, certainly. And of course, if you say it took 2 years, they had 2 years. They could have easily done it within that time frame.
Yeah, I mean, it also ties in with what's actually known because in the last couple of years of the war, the Germans were knocking out submarines like there was no tomorrow. I think they ended up
Yeah.
with 1,100 or something like that. And there was also, I don't want to tar a nation, but there was also kind of sympathizers in those regions, Patagonia and places like that. So it all kind of ties together. So, I mean, so I take it back just from what you just said there, that there's a lot of truth to this, that, these operations were moved down there, and the conspiracies of Third Reich bases. So, I mean, again, do you think they were working with advanced technology? Or do you think the Germans, whether it's the 33 Italian crash or the 36 Black Forest, if they happened, do you think they did get their hands on something? Because they were certainly well advanced.
Absolutely, they did. Well, they had as you mentioned, the crash in the Black Forest region of Germany in 33, and then Mussolini gives them a nearly intact craft that came down in the Lombardy region of Italy in the late 1930s. So they had their hands on all this stuff. And then you had the Vril women who were doing these telepathic transmissions of basically blueprints for these flying craft that Victor Schauenberger said, this is actionable intelligence. We can actually build this stuff. So that was 100 years ago.
I know.
In the 1920s, when the real women were getting this information. And they certainly had the ways and the means and the engineering prowess to backward engineer and make their own craft based on what they had discovered.
I mean, I totally agree the fact that, German technology was pretty advanced. I mean, thank God the world is, caught up a little bit with German tech, but some people will still argue the point. Maybe German technology is some of the best still. But when you cast your mind back, there must have been serious concerns in regarding air supremacy. And that must have been probably one of the most concerning items, maybe to the drive to have to go to war to about the technology, because if any country during the 1940s would have had such significant air supremacy, it's game over, isn't it? Really, so I can understand the necessity and the rush and the need to try and obtain the technology and put a stamp on this as fast as they possibly could to stop the German forces from pursuing this. Because I think if they had, I think maybe all our lives may have been significantly different.
I think a thing to mention there as well. Yeah. Exactly. I think things mentioned there though about the technology is the Italian aviation industry. And you spoke about the crash in Lombardy at the start. I think at the start of the 1930s, certainly 1920s. The Italian aviation industry was it was like bottom of the pack. By the time we get to the Second World War, they'd rocketed up and made such significant breaks. So again, it's something else that just kind of ties in. Going back to the bases down in Antarctica, though, Brad, I mean, there are some researchers, I know we should treat these conspiracies, if you like, or claims with a bit of a pinch of salt sometimes, but there was almost like not that the war was continuing, but there was also a secret war going on behind the scenes. And we know that the Americans did track lots of German officers and high-ranking military people into South America. We've seen those files. So do you think there was a lot more going on than just, reconnaissance missions? And what do you think the authorities knew? And where did they get the information from? Was it through Operation Paperclip?
Well, Paperclip was all the scientists and engineers and even high-ranking officers that, quite frankly, should have been in the Nuremberg trials for crimes against humanity. Yet they were brought over here and started up the CIA, went into our aerospace like Werner von Braun and Hermann Oberith, who, by the way, at the end of his career at his retirement party, somebody asked him, where did Germany, how did you guys get so advanced so quickly? And he says, well, we had some help from our friends from above.
Yeah.
So they're clearly admitting that they were working with alien tech. And they were at NASA, they were specifically using rocket technology, which is a big step below uh,
Yeah.
the anti-gravity or zero point energy that these dish-shaped craft were working off of. They kept the best technology to themselves, and why wouldn't they?
Hmm.
Because again, they had 2 years to get all this stuff down there. They had these giant U-boats, which were cargo container ships that could basically go underwater at Hamburg, which, by the way, at the end of World War II, Hamburg and the U-boat ports of Norway were still German uh, proprietary. So they could get stuff out of Hamburg till the very last day of the war. So a lot of those U-boats that were going down there in the Fuhrer's convoy could have contained these very top secret dish-shaped craft, as well as some of the engineers that got out. And they, a couple of the U-boats that turned up in South America after the war, after interrogation, they said that they were part of this Fuhrer's convoy and they were coming back from Antarctica. It's like, well, what were you doing down there? But their cargo holds were empty, so they were obviously bringing stuff down there. And so the mystery just deepens and deepens the more you get into this. But I think we can make a case that the Fourth Reich started right after World War II, because you got the money man, Martin Bormann, who was the number two under Adolf Hitler at the very end of the war, his personal secretary. He keeps popping up all around South America in the 1950s. And you know, there are metric tons of gold that were seized by the Nazis during World War II that have completely gone missing, as well as several priceless artifacts and museum pieces like the Spear of Destiny, which I cover in the book because it may have gone down to Antarctica with all this other material.
Yeah, it's fascinating. What's the situation in modern times then, Brad? I mean, is Antarctica kind of cut up into segments? Because is it a bit like international waters that different countries do different? I know they're doing experiments and doing different things, but is it sort of segregated and separated into different aspects of places where people can come from different countries and conduct what they do in there, their experiments or whatever?
Well, so in the 1950s, you have the very top secret atomic bomb testing called Operation Argus. Like Operation High Jump, Argus is still top secret. Can't even do Freedom of Information Act to get information in this country. Operation Argus was in the Southern Ocean around New Schwabenland, which is called Queen Maud Land on maps. And they were testing nuclear bombs in 1957, 1958, and they think it could have been retaliation for the loss at Operation High Jump, that they were nuking these bases. I would like to go down there with some Geiger counters. I'd go back there again. Probably fly in this time and check it out, because if we could find out that there's radioactivity detected around New Schwabenland, that could change history there.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was reading something the other day, and I'm sure they were saying that where the ozone layer, where the hole was, it was pretty much in correspondence with that area. Have you found that, Brad? In your
yeah. So that was called Alternative One, where they said, "Oh, well, we'll blast some holes in the ozone." That was the cover story for Operation Argus. Alternative Two was, we're going to build deep underground military bases, and there's going to be some catastrophe on Earth, and we got to get out of here. And then Alternative Three was going off planet. There is good evidence that all three of those have occurred. Of course, we know there are many deep underground military bases all over the place, including giant cities here in America, under the Denver airport and several out east, Mount Weather and other locations. You guys have the Peasmore base.
For sure, yeah.
In the UK, I mean, we're kind of all in the same basket here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's true, even in the Soviet Union, they've got the Metro 2 system. I mean, no, it's just a conspiracy or a claim, but it's pretty well documented. So it just goes back to like what Steve was saying there in modern times. Well, you mentioned the Fourth Reich. I mean, what's that comprised of? I'm not expecting to nail this and say this is, because it's such a loaded question, but in your opinion, what were the reasons for going down there? Is it just it's out of the way place, nobody can really see what's going on or even visit without permission? Or is there something special about Antarctica that they know or they learned somehow? What's your research tell you?
So right after Operation Argus, that is the beginning in 1958 of the Antarctica Treaty, which was fully ratified in 1961. And then that did segment off part of the continent for no-go zones.
Yeah,
There are areas with no-fly zones, with no-go zones. I remember reading in Nexus magazine about 20 years ago, two women who were Olympic cross-country skiers were trying to cross-country ski across Antarctica. Well, they must have veered off course because all of a sudden some Navy SEAL helicopters came down and said, "You ain't going any further, ladies. Get on in." And they had to call off their trip.
Wow.
So there are areas where you definitely cannot go down there, nor fly over this one particular area near the South Pole, which I do believe is where this massive hole in the ice is.
Mm.
And I've talked to Brian S., who is Linda Moulton Howe's whistleblower. We spoke for about an hour a couple months ago when I was in the research phase of my book, and they defied orders because they had to do a medical evacuation, and they flew over this no-fly zone, which was supposed to be an air sampling station out there. He said there was no such thing, there's no air sampling station. But what they did see, the entire crew was this giant hole in the ice with tracks from the cat tracks, the snow cats that you'd see grooming the trails on ski mountains. That's what they use for moving supplies around in Antarctica, as well as snowmobile tracks, went out to the hole. And he said that there's a road that corkscrews down. So they do the drop off at the Davis base and they're coming back. And then over the line says, "Hey, you're veering off course again. Don't go over that area." And when they landed back at the South Pole Station, boy, they were read the riot act, and there are spooks down there from the NSA. And there's a building in McMurdo, the largest base, the American base, that's an NSA building. It's like the biggest unkept secret down there, like Area 51. Everybody knows it's there, but they don't know what they're doing in there. So the NSA is operating out of the South Pole. And ever since the Antarctica Treaty, that has given cover for certain areas that are no-go zones.
Mm.
So I think that they have since, yeah, different countries have bases there,
yeah.
and you can do scientific research. That's what the Antarctica Treaty says. You can actually even go there as a tourist, like I did, but you have to stay to your certain regions.
Yeah, of course, you'd have to be confined. There was some talks not too long ago, Brad, of a so-called specialized meeting that took place there involving politicians, scientists, even astronauts. Do you know if there was any truth to that?
Well, there was certainly around the year 2016, 2017. That was about just 2 years before I went down there. There were a whole bunch of dignitaries, royal family members like Prince Harry. So
Oh,
Prince Harry, he goes down to the South Pole with a bunch of his army buddies, and they do a week-long cross-country ski trip out of the South Pole. Well,
I do
there's
remember this.
nothing for hundreds of miles in
Yeah,
all four directions. So what are you going to see unless they had permission to go see the hole?
yeah,
But then you
most
get
definitely.
John Kerry, who was there on election
Mm,
day.
mm,
You'd think he'd be campaigning for his party when Hillary Clinton was going against Trump the
Mm.
first election. But no, he's down in Antarctica. Then you get Buzz Aldrin, the
Yes.
second man to walk on the moon. And then he sends this cryptic tweet that he's seen the face of evil and that we're all in danger. Took
mm,
that tweet down, but enough people did a screen capture to show it. And by the way, the picture that he used was one of the pyramids that's supposed to be down there too. But he would never talk about that event ever again. But
yeah.
Buzz Aldrin needed to get medevac evacuated off of Antarctica. And that's a very difficult and expensive thing to do
Well,
to
yeah.
get someone out of there.
Absolutely. Well, it makes me think, like you spoke about, and I remember this in the news as well, and I know that again, people spin it in different ways, but the fact is they were there. Did there's any kind of ritualistic aspect to all this? I mean, especially when you consider the Hollow Earth, which I know some people say
Oh,
is
yeah.
preposterous, but there's some of the greatest minds in history have proposed that this could actually exist, so it's not something silly, really. But yeah, do you think there's
Right.
a ritualistic aspect to these gatherings and things like that? Because it does seem to be a place that if you know, kind of thing, like the Paris map and things like that. There's obviously a
Right.
history to Antarctica. So, what are your thoughts on that, Brad?
In also to answer your question further, Steve, is just a couple of years ago, that's when Christine Lagarde from the EU and also Mr. Klaus
Yes.
from
Yeah.
the WEF, they were reportedly going down there. Did you know there's a Rothschild Island down there?
What?
And there is
No.
a base in the Rothschild Island. Yeah, when I was going down there, I asked Dr. Michael Sala, who's done a lot of
Right.
Mm.
Antarctica research, what should I look for on the Antarctica Peninsula? And he said, well, down there towards the bottom of the Antarctica Peninsula is the Rothschild Island, and that's supposed to be where the elite go to gather. So
Well,
one thing everybody should understand is that Antarctica is the most volcanically active continent in the world.
Mm.
14 known active volcanoes, but 93 geothermal features. And so the polar plateau is over 2 miles thick of ice. And if you have geothermal activity at the ground continental level, it's going to create these large under ice domes and occasionally a chimney so the hot air can
yeah.
get out. And that's what the holes in the ice are. So it's very plausible that there are bases under the ice. We don't even have to go into the hollow earth.
Mm.
Just on the continental level, under the 2 mile ice in these arc of ice domes, you have the propensity of even warm climates because of the geothermal heating.
Yeah.
Hot springs. We actually went and visited a hot spring on Deception Island, which is a volcanic caldera. By the way, has a lot of UFO sightings there too. And it even said in the Lonely Planet, there's a Lonely Planet guidebook that said if you go to Deception Island, you can drop anchor here and walk around and go take a hot spring. And we would have, but the tide was starting to come in and it cooled it off. But
Well, what a
this goes to
convenient
show,
name.
yeah, there's a lot of warmth down there.
Well, you'd have to obviously consider if there is anything. I mean, assumably, such a large continent like that, if it could be occupied, it would have to have been occupied at a time when maybe the Earth was at a different tilt, for an
Mm,
example, that the climate was obviously different over that region. But because of its size, it's easy to accept the fact that there's must been some form of ancient civilization there. I mean, there is on every other continent on the planet.
mm,
But of course, if something had happened where the regions would have changed in the weather, then yeah, I could understand maybe being covered in ice, you know. But
mm.
like I say, it must be ancient. If there is anything down there, it must be at a time when Earth was different, you know, the climate, to be sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the fossil record, there's a location called Mount Buckley at the top of the Beardmore Glacier. And the Scott Party, which was on a race to get to the South Pole in 1913 with against Raoul Amundsen, who the Norwegian that beat the Scott Party just by 35 days. But
Mm.
on the way back, they were collecting fossil samples to bring back to the Royal Academy of ferns, of even dinosaurs that only existed in Antarctica, and only in a steamy jungle could they
Yeah.
have lived. So obviously, Antarctica was once a very warm climate that moved to its present location during a pole shift event
Mm.
and then froze everything over. So there was definitely some kind of jungle during the time of the dinosaurs
Yeah.
that was discovered in the fossil record. And by the way, that is why the Scott Party failed because they were carrying all their supplies on their shoulders in sleds. whereas Amundsen used a dog party. Amundsen's party, they all survived, but all five of the Scott party perished on the
Yeah.
ice on the return trip.
Yeah.
Wow. It's
Just how
interesting
cold.
you mentioned. Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
I only wanted to know just how cold it
Yeah.
actually gets there. To be honest with you,
Ooh,
how
brutally
is
cold.
it?
And we
Yeah.
were there during the Antarctica summer, and it was still cold weather, jackets just about every day. But I'll tell you, Steve, we did get a couple days when the sun came out and jumped in the water to do the polar plunge. And we were sitting on the deck of the boat in our bathing suits. So there were some days where it was like 60 degrees. But when you're wearing
Right.
cold
Yeah.
Yeah.
weather
Yeah.
clothes the whole time and you get one sunny day, it feels pretty good to take the
Right.
jacket.
I can
Right.
believe it. Just going back to the constant displacement, because there's been a few researchers who have suggested this, and they've used, the fact that ancient monuments don't actually point to where our North Pole is, but they point to where it probably was,
Mm.
back thousands of years. But I'd be interested to know your thoughts, and I don't expect to hang your hat on it. Like I say, I don't know what I think of it myself, really, but some researchers have suggested that if there was a constant displacement, that would have happened very quickly. And
Very
so
quick.
they've kind of tied legends of like Atlantis and Mu to Antarctica. So do you think there's any possible credence to that? That Antarctica could have been the legendary Atlantis or Mera or anything like that?
Yeah, and I have a chapter in the book about all the anomalies, both on the surface where the ice has retreated, and also scans under the ice where you can see city grids and very planned looking city plans. I mean, and Mother Nature does not create perfect,
No.
symmetrical, right angle city grids.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, not on this scale. And so I'll let the reader decide whether they think these areas, which by the way, I also give GPS coordinates. I want people to go and look at these places for themselves using Google Earth. You
Mm.
can zoom right in on a lot of these places and see it for yourself that there is definitely some kind
Questionable
of
things. Yeah.
anomalous things. And some of those are actually under the ice, but there's an area that has melted and you can see down into it. So, yeah, to your question, Steve, I'd say, yeah, perhaps this could be Atlantis that was part of the West Antarctica that moved down to its
Mm.
present location at the last pole
I mean,
shift.
the size. I mean, the sheer size of this continent, which is vast. I mean, I'm assuming that maybe there's much of it that hasn't really been explored still. I would have maybe thought because there's just no real good way of traversing it.
At
I
least
mean, if you
officially,
if you go
anyway.
in a vehicle, it's going to eventually run out of some form of fuel. I mean, it's just it's so vast. I'd assume that there's probably still a considerable amount there that man's never stepped foot on. And well, certainly modern man anyway.
Mm.
So there could be countless discoveries. I'm always hearing of strange things and strange experiments that are being carried out there, magnetic experiments and all sorts of strange things. I mean, since your visit there, Brad, though, there has been somewhat of a pole shift. The North Pole is not in the same place when you left it.
That's right. Well, and that's the magnetic pole, which
Yeah,
is on the move both in the south and the north.
yeah,
So in the
magnetic pole.
north, the magnetic pole had normally been around Hudson Bay. It does move
Yeah.
around on its own, but now it's racing across the Arctic Ocean towards Siberia. Whereas down in the south, the southern magnetic pole had been on the continental landmass of East Antarctica. Now it's offshore. So if you were actually to sail between the magnetic South Pole and the land, your reading would point out to the
Yeah,
ocean for the South Pole. And
yeah,
that's kind of a clue that we might be due for another pole shift. I
it
don't know
could
if
be.
it's in our lifetime, but it's
Yeah,
about that 12,000 year mark where there are there is evidence that around that time, 12 to 14,000 years, the pole shifts. And
Yeah.
this was discovered by Jacques Cousteau, the famous undersea explorer. And he was exploring the cenotes of Mexico, these big sinkholes in the Yucatan Peninsula,
mm,
and he was finding that stalactites and stalagmites were at a 30-degree angle. And he's thinking, well, how the heck
mm,
can you do that? You obviously have to have a dry cave
Mm.
to create those, but they're underwater. So that was some evidence
Yeah.
for pole shift. And then on the anytime there's an old lava field, the lava has magnetic properties that point to the magnetic pole at the time of the eruption when they're laid down. And many of those really old lava flows show a different
Yeah.
magnetic pole altogether. So there's quite a bit of evidence that we do go through these pole shift experiences on Earth
Yeah, I
between
mean,
every 12 and 14,000 years. And
that's,
about the
I mean,
last time there was one was when Atlantis went down 12,000 years
yeah,
ago.
and that the
Yeah.
Sphinx bears that out too, doesn't it? With the research of Robert Schoch, I mean, he was saying that the water erosion, which is clearly, at least in his opinion, is water erosion, could only have happened at least 12,000 years ago because there was just
Yep.
no rain in that area. So it does appear. I've heard some researchers put forward that this cycle is a 26,000 year cycle, and so they'll say we're like 13,000 years away, whereas others, like you say, are suggesting that something's coming quickly. So, I mean, has your research suggested anything like that? And off the back of that, do you think the governments, the powers that be, do you think they're aware of this? And do you think they keep
Oh,
it from
I
us?
think they're very aware of it, but they don't want to alert the public, just like with Three Eye Atlas. How come we're
Yeah.
getting so little information about what this thing
I
is?
know.
And it's barreling in towards Earth next month. We're going to have this some
Yeah.
kind of close encounter with whatever Three Eye Atlas is, but are they telling us what it is? No, because NASA's on a government shutdown. They bureaucracy can't release that
Right,
information.
yeah.
Come on. Really?
Yeah.
This is going to affect everybody on Earth, but they won't. They're being
Yep.
very tight-lipped. Same thing with Antarctica.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I can well imagine. Of course, there's lots of other stories of the pyramid type structures visually that can be seen,
Yep.
which has been debated for years. But I did have a look at these, and I have to say that they were very, very cleanly cut, straight, and they do look pyramidal type structures, very large. Do you know if there's more than just? I've only seen the images of one. Is there others you might be aware of across Antarctica?
Yeah, and I have pictures of them in the book of three different pyramidal shaped, could be mountains. They call them nunataks, which are just attractive four-sided pyramidal shaped mountains poking through the ice. And that's another thing, another reason I'd like to go down there because the Shackleton range of mountains is where the one they called it the Great Pyramid of Antarctica
Yes.
lies. It's exactly 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. So it's giant. It's
Very
way bigger
odd.
than the Egyptian one or
Yeah.
any pyramid on Earth, but it's perfectly four-sided. And I know a tour group that takes trips down there and they fly over it, and he calls it the Nun Attack. And I asked the guy, the team leader, well, have you ever landed there? Did you ever go down and investigate? I said, no, we just fly over it on our way to Union Glacier. And then people that want to go climb the tallest mountain in Antarctica called Vinson Massif, we'll just fly over it and point it out. But then we call it a nun attack. I said, but you never investigated it or climbed it or taken a core sample or seen if it had been intelligently built. So I think the jury is still out on that one, Steve.
Yeah.
And that would be another game changer. If we could find out that one of these three pyramids, and then the other two are in Oates Land, and then another one in the Ellsworth and Shackleton Range. And the one in the Shackleton Range, my friend David Hatcher Childress, one of the stars on Ancient Aliens, he said on the show, he said, this has all the hallmarks of being the original pyramid on Earth, that all the other pyramids are
So it
based
could
upon.
predate them. Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're talking, well back into the time of Atlantis. This
I
could
mean,
be
is there a great distance between these other pyramids and this one, or are they relatively in the same area?
no, they're quite far apart. Well, there's Ellsworth and Shackleton are probably the closest, maybe 1,000 miles different. But people have got to realize Antarctica is huge. It's the
Vast.
fifth largest continent in the world. So the distances are very vast. So when people are saying, "Oh, you were down there. Why didn't you go check out the pyramids or go to
Yeah.
New Schwabenland?" It's like that's a whole other trip.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, Brad, what do you think the powers that be have to gain? I mean, we spoke about it's a place for them to do experiments where they can pry an eyes and all of that things, which we can all get our heads around. But in terms of like an ancient civilization being discovered there, I mean, is it similar to the UFO thing? People would just panic, or they don't want to rewrite history. For what gain have they got to actually keep this information to themselves? Because you would think people would be shouting from the rooftops and would be wanting to learn as much as we could about human history. So, what are the reasons for that? Do you think, Brad? I mean, are they quite nuanced, for example?
And let's also put that the Germans never left in that
Right? Yeah,
category.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
What if their bases didn't really go down even after they got nuked on Operation Argus? And because I've identified three locations in the book, there's the base 211, the original one, they went down to settle, and that might have had some surface buildings, but it too was under the ice. New Berlin was certainly under the ice. And then there's another one called the Thule Refuge, where we have pictures from Google Earth of these entranceways where you could fly craft, even planes, into some of these underground tunnel areas, all in the New Schwabenland area. Then, when these maps came available, just in the last couple of years, so there was this Russian researcher named Nicholas Subotin, and he came out with his own YouTube video. And I have this great research assistant that helped me with this book. He's just amazing researcher because he's Dutch, but he can read German and speak German, but he can also interpret Russian. And this journalist in Russia spoke only Russian, but he basically came out with these U-boat maps that we reproduce in the book that show the under ice world. We're not even talking about inner Earth, just under the ice.
Mm.
And they had the U-boat directions to go well deep into the continent. And if you look at what Antarctica looks like without the ice, there are these long, deep fjords.
Mm.
So if you know how to get there, you can travel just on the surface of the water to go close to the South Pole, which, by the way, is where that giant hole in the ice is. And that's where this, it's described on the German U-boat maps as the lighthouse of Agartha. They actually call it that in
Oh.
German on the maps.
Oh,
So
they
they're
do.
talking
Oh,
about
that's
this
interesting.
under ice realm. Yeah, that could very well be what they also used for their um, the U-boat maps would direct them
Mm.
to New Schwabenland, um, and then all these other areas that they've identified, and you can see the names on the maps under the ice in this
Well,
different
yeah,
world than the
yeah.
surface. So it's groundbreaking material,
It really is. If they did ever if they did had discovered anything there, they wouldn't need to move it.
right?
It's in its best place left there, to be honest with you. I mean, it's
It's the
got to be
last
probably the
explored.
most sensitive place on the planet. I mean, aircraft
Absolutely.
don't fly over it much. There's not much many ships and things and activities. There's not many people to be whistleblowing every 5 minutes, and so it is pretty contained. And it has seemingly and has been contained quite well. I mean, we listen to all the other areas around the world in regarding, any secrets. There's always people coming forward saying, well, yeah, I worked there and I saw this and this, that, and the other. And we tend to get a constant stream. We don't tend to get a constant stream from there. And I think that really does lend hand to how literally, it's just off the map. And it's just hardly any information coming in or out. Is a secure place. So if anything was discovered there, leave it there, because that is got to be one of the most secure places on the planet.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely
good
is.
point.
I mean, Brad, just before I'm going to move on to UFOs in a bit because we brought them up earlier, so I'd like to get your thoughts on that. But I don't know if your researchers during the Falklands War in the early 1980s, for
Oh, yeah.
example. And again, I know we need to be cautious with some of these claims. Like I get that, but some people have insinuated that it wasn't the island that they were actually fighting over. It was almost like a gateway to Antarctica. So again, have you heard of anything of that? And are those claims credible or are they nonsense? What are your thoughts?
Well, my last chapter before the conclusion is called The Black Goo. And this is all
Brilliant.
about what the Falkland Wars was really
Yeah,
all
yeah.
about.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm coming to the UK next month for Miles Johnston's Bases project.
Yes.
Would
All
certainly
right.
love to meet up with you guys.
Yeah, that'd be
And
good.
but Miles, I quote him a
Yeah.
conversation that we had about 2 years ago about some of his whistleblowers on the Bases project. That's Harold Kotzvela, who I've spoken with on an interview before, and uh, David Griffin,
Yeah.
who
Yes.
basically point out that the Falkland Wars, I mean, what are they going down there for? There's
Again,
more
there's
sheep in
nothing
the
there.
Falklands than people.
Mm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the armada of ships broke off into two groups. And I reprint a map from Wikipedia showing that the other group that was a very top secret was called Operation Keyhole, that went to get the South Sandwich Islands, which basically captured them all without incident, including the very last island was called South Thule Island. And that's actually where the Falkland Wars ended, when the 8 researchers just put up a white flag, not a shot was fired, but they signed the armistice agreement, the surrender of the Argentinian forces offshore of South Thule Island. Now, what the heck was the Royal
Why?
Navy
What's so
doing down there?
important? Yeah.
Yeah, what was so
What's it worth
important?
fighting
Yeah.
over? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. You know, why they
And
put
that
so
was
much
to,
effort
to
into it.
capture the black goo. And then they
Mm.
came back on a subsequent trip and got this sentient black oil,
Mm.
which when it's in a frozen state is inert. It can't do anything. It's just like hard tar. But when they started taking it back to the UK to backward engineer, when they crossed the equator, then it started to come alive. And if you just put your finger near it, it'll rise up to try to match you, to meet you.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
backstory is that they brought it to Marconi Laboratories. You had all these mysterious deaths when they're
Yeah.
trying to backward
Yeah.
engineer it. They wanted to use it to enhance soldiers
Right.
because when ingested, you get like these superhuman properties. At least that's what they thought they
Mm.
were going to get out of it, but it escaped and it got out. And that's probably a whole interview or book in and of
Absolutely.
itself about
It
what
re
this black goo is all about.
it really
And what,
could be. Can I just ask you one question off the back of that, Brad? Because you mentioned there about super soldiers, and I know there's again those conspiracies swirling, but I was reading a report about just those type of experiments that the Third Reich were conducting. They referred to them as polar men, but they were essentially trying to change
yeah,
their conditions so they could survive in the harsh. So again, a lot of people dismiss that sort of stuff without actually looking at it. But is it worth looking into? Are there some credence into those claims that they were doing these type of experiments?
yeah, exactly. And well, this was also in Nexus magazine where during Operation Tamerlan, which the Brits were down there the whole time spying on the Nazis, they knew they had to try to knock out this base. And so they sent a very elite team to try to get into base 211 and knock it out. And they're communicating with their comrades who are still on the Antarctic Peninsula. And the last basic communication they got were they were being pursued by these Arctic man that were basically, gosh, what would you say? Kind of a cross between a Bigfoot or a dominable snowman and a
Mm,
human.
mm,
But they were basically genetically engineered to offer perimeter security to the German bases. And they caught wind of this elite British team that was trying to go in there and blow it up. And that was the last they ever heard of them.
Mm.
That they were being pursued by
Yeah, yeah.
these Arctic men that were impervious to the incredibly cold
Genetically
conditions on the
enhanced.
surface.
Would you created or enhanced? Would you say it
Well,
created?
that's the big question.
Mm.
mm.
Well, look, we all know that genetic engineering is a
Oh yeah,
reality.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
look, we had Dolly the sheep back in the 1980s
Yeah,
that was the first
yeah.
cloned being. Yeah, I mean, they have this technology. So to
Mm.
think that they wouldn't use it for nefarious
I
purposes, I
would have
guess, is
thought
being
so.
kind of
Yeah.
naive.
Absolutely. I mean, if we just turn our attention to UFOs, and it's kind of also connects to what you were saying about the ice tunnels under there. Um,
Mm.
Statistics are hard to actually come by on this, but it's pretty much agreed that more UFO sightings happen near or over water than don't. So Antarctica, in my opinion, is almost they could be using the Earth's waters to be, traversing the planets, and it's a great setting off or a launching point from where they are. So, is that again? I'm not expecting you to hang your hat on this, but is that why we do see more UFO sightings over water? Are they kind of using these systems and possibly even tunnel systems under other continents to actually go from one place to another?
Yeah, exactly. And we have a congressman right now. I think his name is Blanchford. He's talking about underwater UFO bases.
Yes.
This is just incredible to hear it from one of our congressmen
Mm.
saying that we've known about this for quite some time. And you get Danny Sheehan, who's a high-powered attorney, but also speaks on the conference scene. He too says that they know about this underwater base off of Guadalupe Island in Mexico, where these huge amount of UFO activity all the time, and our Navy just watches them from time to time, but also in Antarctica. And I mentioned Deception Island, which is a very deep volcanic caldera, and ships coming in and out all the time there. And when I was down there, you guys, I was asking the same question when we went to all the bases. And that is, have you heard of any kind of under ice civilization, antediluvian civilization? No. You know about the pyramids poking through the ice? The answer I got was no, uniformly. But I also asked about any UFO activity. And there was one time where a base, an Argentinian base, and they didn't want to tell me. And it took me about a half hour to get it out of the guy after the woman who kept saying in Spanish, "Don't tell him, you're not supposed to talk about it." She left. And then he finally opened up and said that just a few weeks prior at the Belgrano 2 base, an Argentinian base, not far away from New Schwabenland, they had a UFO sighting where they kind of flew close to the base and everybody ran out and saw it. And then inner base chatter, they told these other bases about it. And then he told us. So there are UFO sightings down there, even in this modern age. But boy, there are so few people down there. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That if you're going to
Yeah.
hide something, this would be the place to hide it.
It really would. That's like I said. I mean, assuming that obviously, the times of the season that it stays light or times of the season it stays dark, I can
Yep.
assume though that it's probably really is absolute zero light pollution. I can't imagine what those skies would look like, to be honest with you, at night, if it was night. But most people traversing there would probably go during the times when it's light and not
That's
dark,
right.
because it can be a
Which,
bit, a bit dangerous, I suppose, traveling in the darkness.
yeah, which is starting right now. So the travel season for Antarctica is mid-November till early March, which of course is summer down there when it's winter up here. And one thing I did not see for the 26 days I was on the sailboat coming in and out of South America were any chemtrails. There's
No,
no geoengineering down there at
I
all.
know, clean
But when
air.
we got back to South America, we did see it in
Yeah, you
Chile
will
and
do.
Argentina.
Is there no signs of anything listed as an observatory? Because you think these are the clear, must be the clearest skies on the planet.
Yes.
You'd think there would be some type of is observatory of some sort, that might have been constructed there. We not no no. I've never come across any information. I've looked, but I've never come across any information pertaining to any observatories there.
Well, this is supposed to be the air sampling station in the no-fly zone area of the South Pole. But Brian S. says it's just make believe. There is no such place. It's just a
Mm.
cover to
Yeah,
keep any planes or personnel flying over. And I have the schematic maps that I reprinted in the book that even say you can't even walk into this area. Now, how is that going to affect an air sampling station?
yeah,
And then they say you can fly over, but you have to be a transcontinental flight. Now, there are no transcontinental flights. So it's kind of just a cover to
yeah,
say, oh, well, we could have let you fly from, say,
yeah,
Johannesburg, South Africa to
Mm.
yeah,
Christchurch, New Zealand, but there are no flights. If you
Yeah.
look at a globe, it just makes no sense to fly that amount. And plus, there's not very many people that live in the southern hemisphere, at least not in these southern locations where you would fly from Ushuaia
Yeah.
to South Africa. You wouldn't even need to go over Antarctica.
What about the
Absolutely.
people that are stationed there? I mean, do any of them sort of ever talk about anything that they may have seen or heard or anything? I mean, where does that information go? Are they just all not gonna, or is it just simply like loose lips to, sink ships so they don't say anything?
Well, by far the majority of people that work on the bases, they come down there seasonally. So they're about to leave now to work there until March. During the winter, when it is that 24 hours of darkness below the Antarctic Circle, there's only 1,000 people on the entire continent. The
Wow.
fifth largest continent in the
Wow.
world, there's only 1,000 people there year round. And of course, they are confined to the bases because then it gets really cold.
Yeah.
You could die of exposure within an hour if
Yeah.
you're out there during a storm, not even that long. So you literally have to cover every inch of your skin when you're down there through the winter months. And
Wow.
it is life threatening. It's
Yeah.
very
Absolutely.
difficult to be there.
I mean, Brad, I'd like to get your thoughts on that. You see, and you kind of alluded to it there. There's only 1,000 people there during the winter, and
Hmm.
and Steve mentioned about the personnel, and we've seen some of them who have like acted as whistleblowers or they've leaked information to researchers. Um, how do you see the future of this going? Because so far, the authorities, or the powers that be, the elite, whatever you want to refer to them as, they've managed to do a pretty good job of keeping this information at least away from the wider public. But nowadays, with the rise of the internet, instant transfer of information, people maybe just feel a bit more adventurous or a bit more confident to actually go and get this information. How do they handle keeping the container on this? Because it seems to me it would be just a matter of time before something gets leaked that's of significance and that possibly that can change people's perspective on a grand scale.
Yeah. Well, it's just the isolation of the location that kept it secret for so long. But now you have drones, long distance flying drones. And my friend Emery Smith, who's on Gaia TV, does Cosmic Disclosure. He's saying that during the season, there are people that'll go out there and they're doing these long distance drones and they're finding some of these anomalies.
Mm.
Supposedly, there are three motherships that our intelligence agencies have known about since the 1970s, and they nicknamed them the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria. And I think I've identified all three of them in the book, even the locations. One of them that Spartan 1 and Spartan 2 talked to Linda Moulton Howe about at the Beardmore Glacier. Another one is in New Schwabenland that I think the Germans found when they were doing their overflights in the 1930s,
Mm.
that they found this location, which is called the Conan Base. It's a seasonal base, it's still there. And in the year 2013, if you go on Google Earth and use the coordinates for the Conan Base, I was just there about a month or two ago checking it out, see if it's still there. They were doing some kind of excavation, and you can see a very large machine-like, about a quarter mile in length. And of course, I reproduced some of those images in the book. And I think these are Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria. And then a third one is where those scientists that went missing for about a week over on, here's another one, the Rockefeller Plateau. It's
Rockefeller
even named
Plateau.
Rockefeller Plateau and uh, the Rothschild's Island. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make this stuff
No,
up.
no, that's as if it's done on purpose. It's like other places around the world, and you think of the names and you think it so stands out with the names and things, but
Yeah.
it's that's kind of the thing they do, isn't it? It's just show it in your face, sort of a thing. It's absolutely fascinating, that all these concepts to a place where hardly anybody knows about,
Right.
or anybody really goes, and anybody stationed there or actually living there is only temporary. It gets shifts around,
Yep.
and even them not talking about much. Anybody would love to just sort of just visit and go and look. But what's so secretive, though? What can be so secretive, higher than, walking into Area 51 in a sense of speaking, that level? What guardship is required for that, for a bit of ice? You know, there's
Mm.
got to be something of significance there. And that's what keeps people's minds so curious as to what's going on, isn't it, really?
Mm.
Absolutely.
And all the people that I met that worked on the bases, they were just young scientists that were coming there to study the
Yeah.
penguin migration or the ice fish. And I just don't think they knew. They're not privy to any of this kind of information. So it's
Mhm.
very compartmentalized what you know down there, and you're just kind of working in your specialty field. That's it. And you're, like you said, just there for the season, and then you're gone, and another group comes in, and they
Yeah.
too are just going down there to work in whatever specialty field that they're going down there to work in.
Yeah.
And even the overseas crews that stay there for the year, they just have their jobs and they'll just do what they are assigned to do. And then after a year, they'll go home. And then
Do
they
you,
don't really know much either.
do
So
you
it's
think?
really been a brilliant kind of way to cover up anything that is going
Oh,
down
yeah.
there, just like in Area
Perfect.
51.
Just answer the next
You'll go
question.
down there
Yeah.
and work on your specialty and then go
Yeah.
back to Las Vegas and go to sleep with your wife and go back the next day and
Yeah.
never really know about some of the other deeper mysteries that are contained down there.
It's as good as being off-world, really,
Really, it
isn't it?
is.
If you think
And it
about
feels
it.
like you're off world.
Yeah, yeah.
What kind of discoveries do you think will be made? Because, as I say, does seem like a matter of time. But even if we don't get to hear about them, do you think that there is that you've kind of already answered that there are signs of an ancient civilization down there? But do you think we could be talking much more? Do you think we could be talking about records of lost history and all this legends of the Hall of Records, for example, and even ancient technology? And just going back to the Paris map, that no one really knows where that kind of came from. I know the official story, but do you think this information has been handed down since possibly the time of ancient Egypt of secret societies and that became the Knights Templar, became the Freemasons and all the different orders? Do you think that this information has been handed down and it's made its way into the hands of the elite today?
Well, yeah, and you mentioned the Piri Reis map. I have a chapter called "The Map of the Ancient Sea Kings"
Right.
with a dozen maps of Antarctica before it was discovered in
Yeah,
1821. Piri Reis map is dated 1513, and in the liner notes of that map, it says that it was drawn from source maps that came all the way back from the Library of Alexandria, and those maps would have been based on very old maps
yeah,
because it shows Antarctica free of the ice. 1513, this is 200, 300 years before it was even discovered by sealers and whalers that went down there and discovered it accidentally. But that shows that there were terrestrial animals there. Some of the maps even show giants in Patagonia.
yeah.
And
The
when I
Patagonian
was
giant.
working on this book, I told and Hugh Newman,
Yeah,
who's Megalithomania, friend of mine, and I'm sure yours,
yeah, yeah,
he said, "Oh, Brad, you got to include the Patagonian giants." And of course, I knew about them, but then I looked into them a lot
yeah.
deeper and did a whole chapter in the book
There's a lot
about
about
them,
them.
which
Yeah,
were twice the size
yeah.
of the
They were
mariners
everywhere.
like Magellan when he was
It
going down
does,
there.
yeah, it does seem that they were everywhere, all over planet Earth. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
every country's got out, even the UK has as
Mm.
well. But it does seem that something was, I don't know, experimenting with humankind, and there were variations of humans and giants and all sorts of things. But Patagonia, yeah, I've talked in depth there with Hugh Newman about that, and actually there was a documentary made
Mm.
with and I think Paula Harris they did a documentary on the Patagonian giants as well. So I know there's a lot of information about that. But if people are drawing that sort of thing, it must have been done at a time when there was no ice, like you said. So now we have a
Mhm.
time frame,
Yeah.
from when that may have likely have taken place, the polar shift, to change the aspects of what Antarctica is, what we see today. And of course, if we start looking at it, are we just entering in a polar shift movement now? Is it going to be as significant, or is it going to be a very slow process as opposed to a fast process? Who knows? But we are seeing movement of the magnetic pole. So then we could say, okay, well, we might have a time frame here. You know, we'd have to see, of course, but it's interesting that we are finding civilizations all over the world that once existed pre-flood,
Oh,
pre-flood era.
sure, yeah.
And it's
Right.
like, when you go up to the top of these mountains in Peru, and you go to these locations, you can see, Pumapuku, when those stones, H blocks were found and stuff, they weren't lined up as we see them today. They were scattered on a mess on the floor, filled up with mud and silt. And when you analyze the silt, it looks like it's like something like it's just been thrown from, as if a massive wave came over the top of mountains. So
Yeah.
you think obviously something significant must have taken place in the past. Maybe it was this. If it was a sudden movement, then I can understand it being crippling to humanity, almost crippling anyway, and we maybe had to start again. But areas may have survived, and then obviously become frozen over, and in a sense become literally like containers which are time locked because of the frozen continent. They could be kept quite pristine, I suppose.
I mean,
As
even
opposed to left out in the elements of the world.
even in the mountains, there's evidence in there. There's like fish bones in caves that are like thousands of feet
That's
in.
right.
Yeah, I mean, the existence of Lake Titicaca, for example, speaking of South
Yeah.
America, is evidence really of mass flooding. But just touching on giants there, what are your thoughts, Brad, on we talked about that 12,000 year mark, that magic figure where everything seems to have changed. When you look at the king's list, the ancient Egyptian king list, for example, we've got huge lifespans. I know the people will say the Egyptian gods were depicted as large because they're just grand, not physically large. But it's interesting that after that 12,000 year mark, when the last ice age suddenly came to an end or began to, that the king's list almost had human life being much more in line with what it is now. So do you think really, these tales of giants, do you think that these tales of giants who live huge lives compared to us, do you think they were kind of wiped out during these floods? And that's why we find the bones in caves and things of that nature.
Yeah, great point, Marcus, because as you said, Steve, with the flood, the mud flood, when I
Yeah.
was down in Malta, there's a cave there that has mega fauna,
Yeah.
such as giant sloth and even mammoths that are packed into a cave with mud. So I
So
don't
they're
remember
picked
in
up and
modern
thrown.
history,
I've
yeah,
been
that there
there.
was ever some kind of flood in the
Yeah.
Mediterranean that would have packed in
Yeah.
these mega flora. And then up in Siberia, you have mammoths that were still the food that
Food
they're
in the mouth.
eating
Yeah.
when they're instantly frozen. So it does happen in a flash. It does happen very, very quickly and with little
Yeah.
notice. Just all of a sudden, you're just having these massive earth changes, tsunamis, earthquakes, um, volcanoes going
Yeah.
off all around the
Yeah.
world. And then sometimes when water floods into an area, it presses down and that weight pushes up a landmass somewhere else, and then moves stuff around very, very quickly. We
Yeah,
live
of
on an
course.
ocean planet. It's
Mm.
covered 71% with water. So when that water starts moving in the form of tsunamis, I mean, that could just be a wall of water that just basically takes out coastal communities quite quickly in an instant. And
Yeah.
so you wouldn't even see it coming. And a lot of these, what I found down in Antarctica, it was like they were flash frozen, that they were just locked into this new position in Earth. And then because it was so cold down there, the ice settles in on top of it.
Yeah. And I remember there was a movie some years ago that was released, and I think it was about the sudden, I don't know, maybe a pole shift or something, and they were flash freezing in it. But it's
Mm.
an interesting tie here because I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was actually wrote by none other than Whitley Strieber under a pseudonym.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but they believe that in science they say yes, these sudden freezing sessions actually did happen, and it would explain why animals have been caught sort of in the middle of chewing food, and things like that. And you can see that it's in the mouth still. That something happened very fast. Something obviously it was quite destructive and catastrophic, but then that catastrophe can lend hand to the preservation of an ancient civilization due to it being trapped in ice. To consider. So that might be the big interest. In the fact is, wouldn't it be great if we could go back to Egypt in the time when what Egypt looked like?
Oh,
Right.
We don't see nothing, hardly nothing. We just see three pyramids and a few other bits scattered around nowadays. But a place like that could be preserved, couldn't it? So maybe
Oh,
that's
I
a
mean,
big signal.
ancient Egypt, they've still got 90% left to discover, haven't they? I mean, it's just
Right.
literally buried under the sand. We don't know
Under the sun.
hardly anything about what's there. I mean, Brad, we're gonna have to let you go soon. We're coming up to that 90-minute mark. But one last thing I'd like to get your thoughts on. What do you not what you hope to achieve? That sounds a bit silly, but what would you like to see happen after, in the light of this book you've just released? We'd like to see other researchers come along and start to, push this work forward, put the focus on Antarctica, and indeed, are you going to be doing that yourself? Or are you going to be moving on to something else?
Yeah, indeed. Well, what I'd like to achieve is just to bring a whole lot more awareness about what's going on down there,
Yeah.
and what's under the ice in the ice continent. And I would like to go down there again. We have a proposal with a venture capital company called VC Cross to raise the funds to go down there with a film crew, go to the Shackleton Pyramid, to go to New Schwabenland, to go to the South Pole. Maybe we'll just be there, right place, right time, and get permission to go cross country ski out to the hole like Prince Harry did. And
You never know.
this would just be an absolute game changer. I
Yeah, yeah.
mean, if any one of these three produced pay dirt, we would be changing history quite literally.
Mm.
And I just would like to go down there as a filmmaker like you, Steve, and just look into these biggest questions that
Yeah.
Antarctica still has. But I think I've revealed quite a few of them in the new book. So,
Yeah, that's a really good thing. And I'm glad that it's great that you've got all this source material in one place,
yeah,
because anybody who's out there interested in this subject, they have to trawl the internet to get these little bits. And you know what? It's hard work looking all over the place. So it's great that somebody actually focuses on one dedicated area of research as to what is going on there in that location. It's a big mystery. It's one of the biggest mysteries that people just kind of don't even talk about anymore because it is the furthest of all mysteries, isn't it? I don't even get into Antarctica, talk about that because it's just too secret. Too
So
secret,
interesting. So interesting. I mean, Brad, before we let you go, I mean, it's been fascinating speaking. It really has been fascinating as well. I wanted to really clarify that. You mentioned that you'd like to go back to Antarctica. Hopefully, the documentary comes off. We all hope to see that. But um, what does the future hold? What are your plans? Have you got any lectures coming up? Any more books coming out? Floor's yours for 30 seconds, my friend.
well, certainly, The Secrets of Antarctica is at the printer right now. It'll ship at the end of the year, but the ebook version is now available on Kindle as well as Google Books. So we're doing a pre-release with the ebook. And so right now I'm just doing a whole bunch of interviews and talking about this, but I'm working on my 12th book, which is called Underwater Archaeology, and that's
Oh,
quite fascinating because it
yeah,
contains a whole bunch of megalithic sites underwater. Now, how do you build a
yeah,
megalithic site underwater? It had to have been at a time
yeah,
like during the last ice age when the sea levels were 70 to 80 feet lower than they are right now. So again, we're talking about antediluvian
yeah.
civilizations, which everything on Earth is getting dated older and older and older. It's rewriting history, and
Mhm.
it's showing that we live at a time when all these great mysteries and secrets are finally coming to the fore. And I just am quite honored to have the role that I play in helping people understand what's really going on in Antarctica and how that might be part of our
Yeah,
ancient history too.
Absolutely.
yeah.
When that new book comes out about underwater archaeology, we'll have to get you back on because
Yeah, we'd have
fantastic,
to, yeah,
fascinating
because that's
conversation.
another fascinating
Yes.
subject.
Well, Steve Mera is quoted in the new book, and he offered a really great
Thank you.
endorsement that's on page one. So certainly, I'd love to come back and we'll take this
Yes,
further
love to.
because there's still so much ground that we haven't covered yet.
Oh,
So
for
much.
sure. No, well, we'd definitely like to see you back on. And just to our viewers, make sure you do get a hold of that book. Obviously, the e-version will be available if you want the paperback or the hard copy. It's going to be out at the end of the year or start of next year. So I urge you to read it. Brad, look, thank you so much for joining us. It really has been fascinating. I would love to speak to you again. So thanks for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Oh, you're
Brad.
very welcome, guys. Really a pleasure to speak with
And
you
we look
both today.
forward to seeing, if we get a chance, we look forward to seeing you over in the UK shortly.
Sounds great. Will do.
Absolutely second that. And thank you guys for joining us. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you follow us on social media, and also check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further news, articles, and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.